the underwater city of Cuba. It started as a routine treasure hunt, but it ended as one of the most blatant cover-ups in modern archaeology. In 2001, a marine engineer named Paulina Zelitsky was scanning the deep ocean floor off the western coast of Cuba. She wasn't looking for ancient history. She was working for a firm called Advanced Digital Communications, ADC, searching for sunken Spanish galleons loaded with gold. But at a depth of 2,200 feet, a crushing darkness where no sunlight ever reaches, her side-scan sonar didn't reveal a shipwreck. It revealed a metropolis. The images that came back were terrifyingly precise. They showed massive symmetrical stone structures spread over nearly 2 square kilometers. We aren't talking about random piles of rocks or natural geological formations. These were distinct, organized geometric shapes. Zelitsky identified what looked like pyramids, vast rectangular buildings, and intersecting roads, all composed of huge blocks of granite. To a detective, the presence of granite is the smoking gun, because granite does not naturally occur on the ocean floor in that area. It has to be moved there. It has to be built. The implications were impossible. For a city to have been built on dry land at that specific location, the ocean levels would have to be 2,000 feet lower than they are today. The last time the Earth's geography looked like that was roughly 50,000 years ago. According to every history textbook in every school, humans were barely mastering fire and stone tools back then, let alone constructing massive, complex megacities that rival ancient Egypt. This discovery didn't just challenge history, it broke it. When the news first broke, it was explosive. National Geographic and major scientific institutions immediately promised a full-scale expedition. They planned submarines, cameras, and documentaries. The world was ready to see the Atlantis of the Caribbean. And then, the silence fell. The expedition was quietly canceled. The funding evaporated overnight. Zelitsky found herself blocked by sudden bureaucratic red tape and was never able to return to the site with the proper equipment. The official narrative shifted from discovery of the century to sonar anomalies, dismissing the clear geometric shapes as mere glitches in the machine. But machines don't hallucinate pyramids. The shortcut is simple. You don't abandon the most important archaeological find in human history unless you are ordered to. Someone decided that rewriting 50,000 years of our past was too dangerous for the public to handle. So, the question isn't just who built this impossible city. The real question is, who has the power to make an entire city disappear for the second time? The Baltic Sea Anomaly. In June 2011, a Swedish salvage group known as the Ocean X Team was scanning the bottom of the Gulf of Bothnia, searching for old shipwrecks and champagne crates. What they found on the sonar at 300 feet deep wasn't a ship. It was a structure that looked like it had crashed there from another world. The sonar image revealed a massive, perfectly circular object, 60 meters in diameter, featuring rigid geometric lines, box-like corridors, and what appeared to be a staircase leading into a dark abyss. It looked so much like the Millennium Falcon that the press turned it into a joke, but to the shortcut detective, the joke ended the moment the crew tried to get close. As the expedition boat positioned itself directly above the anomaly, the investigation turned into a horror movie. Every piece of electronic equipment on the vessel, satellite phones, cameras, radar, and the boat's own navigation systems, suddenly died. It was a total blackout. The crew was baffled. They drifted away, and the moment they reached a distance of 200 meters from the object, the systems flickered back to life. They moved back over the spot, and the equipment died again. This was not a malfunction. It was a localized field of interference. Nature does not produce electromagnetic pulses that selectively target technology. When divers eventually went down to physically inspect the rock, they didn't find a natural formation. They found smooth walls, right angles, and a strange soot-colored material that looked like burnt concrete. Even more terrifying was the runway, a 985-foot-long flattened ridge behind the object, as if this massive disk had skidded across the ocean floor before coming to a halt. The samples they brought back were analyzed by labs in Israel and Stockholm, which found traces of metals like limonite and goethite in concentrations that geologists admit are extremely strange for a natural seabed formation. The official scientific community waved it off as a glacial deposit, a rock dragged there by Ice Age ice sheets. But the detective asks the obvious, since when do glaciers sculpt 90-degree corridors, leave skid marks, and emit an energy field that kills modern electronics? We are looking at a crash site that has been sitting in the silt for 14,000 years, and the battery is apparently still running. If this is just a rock, why did the equipment fail? And if it's not a rock, is the crew lucky that they couldn't open the door? The Bloop. In the summer of 1997, researchers at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, were listening to the deepest, darkest corners of the Pacific Ocean using a classified network of underwater microphones known as SOSUS. Originally designed during the Cold War to track the faint hum of Soviet nuclear submarines, this system was sensitive enough to hear a propeller turn from hundreds of miles away. But what it picked up off the southern coast of Chile wasn't a submarine, and it wasn't a whale. It was a sound so violently loud that it registered on sensors spaced more than 3,000 miles apart. They named it the Bloop, a cute name for a terrifying anomaly. To a detective, the loudness is the critical evidence. The blue whale is the largest animal to ever exist on Earth, and its call is the loudest biological sound known to science. But the Bloop wasn't just louder than a blue whale, it dwarfed it. For a sound to travel that distance with that intensity, the source would have to be an organism significantly larger than anything currently in the fossil record. A leviathan that defies our understanding of biology. The smoking gun, however, isn't just the volume, it's the signature. When the sound was first analyzed, Dr. Christopher Fox of NOAA stated that the audio profile, the way the frequency rose and fell, mimicked the voice of a living creature. It had the rapid frequency variations of a vocalization, not the sharp percussive crack of geology. It sounded like a beast. But as the public interest grew, the official story suddenly shifted. Years later, NOAA retracted the animal theory and claimed the sound was merely an ice quake, a massive iceberg cracking and calving in the Antarctic. They closed the case. But the shortcut detective looks at the spectrograms. An ice quake looks like a chaotic burst of noise, a mess of static. The Bloop looked like a distinct, coherent, low-frequency wave, a call. Why did the experts initially identify it as organic, only to pivot to a safe, boring geological explanation once people started asking about monsters? Did they realize the math implied a predator larger than a city block was patrolling the deep Pacific? The sensors heard it once, loud and clear, and then the ocean went silent again. So, we are left with a chilling choice. Either the ice sings in a way we've never seen before, or something down there is awake, and it is much, much bigger than us. The Yonaguni Monument. In 1987, a local diver named Kihachiro Aratake jumped into the rough, shark-infested waters off the southern tip of Yonaguni Island, looking for new spots to view hammerhead sharks. He swam down to the seabed, turned a corner, and froze. Rising out of the blue gloom wasn't a coral reef or a random rock formation. It was a massive, monolithic pyramid. The structure, now known as the Yonaguni Monument, is a megalithic complex roughly the size of 2 football fields, composed of sharp right angles, perfectly flat terraces, and vertical stone walls that look less like geology and more like a fortress. To the shortcut detective, the evidence here is in the geometry. Nature is chaotic. It erodes, it crumbles, and it rounds off edges. Nature does not create crisp 90-degree corners, parallel channels, and perfectly straight staircases that lead to a flat plaza. Marine geologist Masaki Kimura has spent over 15 years diving and mapping every inch of this site, and his findings are impossible to ignore. He has identified what looks like a castle, a triumphal arch, 5 temples, and a massive stadium. He even found what appear to be quarry marks, scars in the stone where wedges were driven in to split the rock, and 2 perfectly circular holes carved into a flat terrace, likely post holes for wooden pillars that rotted away millennia ago. Nature doesn't drill holes. Nature doesn't build drainage canals. The official scientific stance is that this is just a natural formation of sandstone, which tends to fracture in straight lines. They call it a geological quirk, but the shortcut is in the timeline. For this structure to have been carved by humans, it had to be built when this area was above sea level. The last time Yonaguni was dry land was at the end of the last ice age, around 10,000 BC. That is 5,000 years before the first pyramids of Egypt. If this is a city, it means civilization is twice as old as we are told. It means there was a sophisticated culture capable of massive engineering projects, while the rest of the world was supposedly still chasing mammoths with spears. The experts dismiss it because acknowledging it would mean throwing every history book into the fire. But look at the photos. Does that look like a rock that just broke that way? Or does it look like a temple that sank beneath the waves, waiting for us to remember who built it? The Gulf of Khambat. In May 2001, scientists from India's National Institute of Ocean Technology, NIOT, were scanning the muddy, turbulent waters of the Gulf of Khambat, not to rewrite history, but to monitor pollution levels. It was a standard environmental survey. But as the sonar strip rolled out, the pollution data became irrelevant. The acoustic images revealed something that shouldn't be there. A massive, sprawling city sitting 120 feet beneath the waves. This wasn't a small village. It was a metropolis extending for 5 miles along an ancient riverbed, featuring clearly defined streets, drainage systems, and a massive dam running over 600 meters long. To the shortcut detective, the size is the first clue. A city of this scale implies a massive population, central planning, and advanced engineering. But the real smoking gun came when they sent dredgers down to the bottom. They didn't just bring up mud, they brought up the life of the city. They recovered pottery shards, semi-precious stones, carved ivory, and, most critically, a piece of carbonized wood. When labs in Hyderabad and Frankfurt ran the carbon dating on that wood, the results were so shocking that many archaeologists refused to believe them. The wood was dated to 7,500 BC. Let that number sink in. That makes this site roughly 9,500 years old. According to the history books, the first great civilizations, Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley, didn't appear until around 3,000 to 4,000 BC. This underwater ghost town is 5,000 years older than the start of civilization. It means that while our textbooks say humans were simple hunter-gatherers, a sophisticated culture in India was already building mega-cities with plumbing. The implications are terrifying for the established timeline. It suggests that a mother civilization existed during the Ice Age, one that was wiped out when the glaciers melted and sea levels rose, drowning the coastal empires of the ancient world. The academic community has tried to bury this find, claiming the wood could be driftwood from elsewhere, or that the sonar images are just geometric rocks. But rocks don't carve ivory. Rocks don't organize themselves into a 5-mile grid. The shortcut is clear. We are looking at the pre-flood world. We found the ruins of the culture that existed before history began, and it forces us to ask, if a city this advanced can be forgotten for 9,000 years, how many other empires are sleeping in the mud, waiting for us to turn on the sonar? The Eltanin antenna. In 1964, the USNS Eltanin, a technological marvel of an oceanographic research ship, was patrolling the desolate waters west of Cape Horn, scanning the Antarctic floor. This was the height of the Cold War, and while the mission was officially scientific, the military was always listening for Soviet submarines in the deep. They lowered a drop camera on a cable down to a crushing depth of 13,500 feet. An alien world of eternal blackness where pressure turns steel to jelly. When they pulled the camera back up and developed the film, frame number 13 showed something that made the researchers gasp. Standing perfectly upright on the barren mud was not a creature, but a structure. It looked unmistakably like a piece of modern hardware. The object consisted of a tall, straight vertical mast, with a series of crossbars radiating out at precise 90-degree angles, each ending in a small node or sphere. To a radio engineer, it didn't look like biology. It looked like a telemetry antenna. It was eerily similar to the TV antennas you would see on rooftops in the 1960s. The detective looks at the context. The ocean floor at that depth is usually a flat, empty wasteland, or covered in chaotic biological ooze. Yet, here was an object with strict geometry, standing in solitary confinement, with no footprints, no tracks, and no other debris around it. It looked like a marker. For years, the Eltanin antenna circulated in the underground as proof of advanced technology, either ancient or extraterrestrial, hiding in the abyss. The symmetry was too perfect. The spacing of the nodes was too mathematical. Decades later, marine biologists rushed to debunk the mystery, claiming it was actually a rare, carnivorous sponge called Kladderheitse Konkrekens. They produced sketches of a sponge that vaguely resembled the object, but the shortcut detective puts the photo side by side with the sketch. The sponge is organic, curved, and irregular. The object in the 1964 photo is rigid, mechanical, and stark. Did the scientific community find a convenient biological look-alike to explain away a piece of out-of-place machinery? It is the perfect cover. It's just a sponge, move along. But if it was just a sponge, why was it the only one found in the thousands of miles of seabed surveys? Did we stumble upon a natural oddity, or did we accidentally take a picture of a listening post that was put there to watch us? The Mariana Biotwang. In 2014, researchers from Oregon State University sent autonomous acoustic gliders into the most hostile environment on Earth, the Mariana Trench. They were looking to baseline the acoustic noise of the deepest scar in the Earth's crust, a place 36,000 feet deep where the pressure is 1,000 times greater than at the surface. They expected to hear the rumble of earthquakes, the distant groan of ship engines, or the clicks of deep-sea pressure-resistant life. Instead, they recorded a sound that belongs in a sci-fi movie. They named it the Biotwang, but that is a polite way of saying synthetic noise. The sound is a bizarre two-part call lasting about 3.5 seconds. It starts with a low, grumbling moan, typical of a baleen whale, but then it suddenly snaps into a high-pitched, resonant, metallic ring that shoots up to 8,000 hertz. To the shortcut detective, the metallic quality is the fingerprint that doesn't belong. Biological throats produce wet, organic sounds. They gurgle, they whistle, they click. They do not produce the sharp, crisp reverberation of a steel cable snapping or a spaceship engaging its hyperdrive. In fact, when you listen to the recording, it sounds almost exactly like the sound effects of a Star Wars blaster being fired underwater. The official explanation, released years later, is that this is the call of a minke whale. Scientists claim it is a new, previously unheard dialect of these elusive giants. But the detective looks at the discrepancies. Minke whales are typically known for bowings and pulses, rhythmic, repetitive, organic noises. The biotwang is singular, sharp, and spans a frequency range that is insanely wide for a single vocalization. Furthermore, the signal was detected year-round, while minke whales are migratory and usually move to feed. If this is a whale, it is a whale that has learned to mimic the sound of high-tech sonar pinging off a submarine hull. The shortcut: nature rarely produces sounds that mimic industrial machinery this perfectly. We are listening to a sound from the deepest trench on the planet that mimics a synthesized electronic pulse. Did we just discover a whale with a voice box made of metal? Or are the gliders picking up the automated status chirps of something sitting at the bottom of the trench? Something that the whales are trying to talk to? We labeled it biological and closed the file. But every time you hear that metallic ping, it sounds less like an animal and more like a machine turning on. The Milky Sea phenomenon. For centuries, sailors returning from the Indian Ocean whispered stories that sounded like pure madness. They spoke of nights where the sea didn't just sparkle with bioluminescence, it turned into a solid, glowing field of white light. They claimed the ocean looked like a field of snow, or worse, that the ship was sailing across a cloud in the sky, with no horizon and no water visible, just an endless milky void. For hundreds of years, scientists dismissed these reports as the drunken hallucinations of dehydrated mariners. They called it impossible because bioluminescence is supposed to be a flash, a defense mechanism, not a continuous steady beam. But on the night of January 25, 1995, the British merchant vessel SS Lima became the witness that couldn't be ignored. While sailing off the coast of Somalia, the ship was suddenly engulfed by a glowing white silence. The captain recorded that the water appeared to be lit from below by giant floodlights. This wasn't a patch of algae, it was an event. And this time, we had the technology to verify the madness. In 2005, Dr. Stephen Miller of the Naval Research Laboratory pulled up classified satellite imagery from the Defense Meteorological Satellite Program. He found the SS Lima's coordinates, and there it was, a massive glowing smudge on the face of the Earth. The satellite confirmed a patch of luminous ocean, roughly the size of Connecticut, shining steadily for 3 solid nights. To the shortcut detective, the steady state is the anomaly. Nature flashes, fireflies blink, deep-sea fish pulse. But this was a continuous high-powered burn of energy, sustaining itself for 72 hours, over 15,000 square kilometers. The official explanation is quorum sensing, the idea that trillions of Vibrio harveyi bacteria suddenly decided to synchronize their chemical signals to glow in unison. But for bacteria to coordinate on a scale that massive, spanning horizons, implies a level of communication and synchronization that rivals a neural network. It implies a hive mind. Furthermore, why would they do it? Lighting up the entire ocean invites every predator in the ecosystem to the dinner table. It is an evolutionary suicide note, unless the light isn't for them. The shortcut asks, what if this isn't just biology? What if we are looking at the ocean's version of a status light? We verified the myth was real, but we still don't know the trigger. Did the bacteria decide to turn on the lights? Or did something massive beneath the crust energize the water, forcing the ocean to glow like a charged battery? We have seen the seas turn to milk from space, and we still don't know if we are looking at a natural wonder or the exhaust of a machine waking up. The Julia Sound. On March 1st, 1999, the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, was monitoring its vast underwater surveillance network when the needles jumped. From the darkness of the equatorial Pacific Ocean, a sound emerged that didn't fit the profile of geology or biology. They labeled it Julia. Unlike the Bloop, which was a low-frequency rumble, Julia was a long, whining moan that lasted for roughly 15 seconds. It sounded unnervingly like a person cooing or whimpering into a microphone, but slowed down to a terrifying scale. To the shortcut detective, the evidence is in the range. This wasn't a local anomaly. The sound was so incredibly loud that it was picked up by every single hydrophone in the equatorial Pacific Autonomous Hydrophone Array. That means the source was powerful enough to blast a signal across thousands of miles of dense water, maintaining its eerie, vocal-like quality the entire way. It didn't crackle like a volcanic eruption, and it didn't have the rhythmic thumping of a ship's engine. It was a singular, sustained howl. The official explanation is that Julia was the sound of a massive Antarctic iceberg running aground, essentially a mountain of ice scraping against the sea floor. NOAA claims the friction caused the whine. But the detective asks the uncomfortable question, have you ever heard a scraping rock sound like a melody? Icebergs usually grind, rumble, and crack. Julia sang. The sound profile shows a coherent, wavy line that mimics the modulation of a vocal cord, not the chaotic friction of ice on rock. Furthermore, the triangulation pointed to a spot between Bransfield Strait and Cape Adair, a remote wasteland. If it was just an iceberg, why haven't we heard Julia again? Icebergs run aground every day. Why did this specific collision produce a sound that mimics a distress call from a giant? We marked the file as ice, but when you listen to the audio, it doesn't sound like frozen water dying. It sounds like something massive is lonely in the dark, and for 15 seconds, it tried to see if anyone was listening. The Bimini Road. In September 1968, a marine biologist named J. Manson Valentine was diving in the crystal-clear waters off the coast of North Bimini in the Bahamas when he looked down and saw a prophecy come true. Just 18 feet below the surface, stretching across the white sand, was a massive half-mile-long pavement of limestone blocks. This wasn't a scattered pile of rubble. It was a distinct, organized formation. The stones were huge, rectangular, and fitted together with a precision that looked undeniably like the work of masons, not the random erosion of the tides. To the shortcut detective, the timing is the first piece of evidence that makes you shiver. Decades earlier, the famous sleeping prophet Edgar Cayce had made a very specific prediction. He claimed that the ruins of the lost civilization of Atlantis would be discovered near Bimini in the year 1968. Valentine found this road in 1968. The calendar matched the prediction to the letter. But the physical evidence is even more compelling. While skeptics immediately dismissed the site as beach rock, a natural phenomenon where limestone fractures into square shapes, the detective looks closer at the construction. Beach rock cracks in place. It doesn't stack itself. Expeditions to the site have discovered that many of the massive stones are sitting on top of smaller, leveling stones, or shims, placed underneath to make the surface flat. Nature does not use shims. Nature does not level its own foundation before laying a floor. Furthermore, the road takes a distinct J-turn, a deliberate curve that implies a destination. It looks for all the world, like a massive breakwater or a causeway meant to protect a harbor that is now gone. The official scientific consensus remains firm. This is just a quirky geological formation. They claim the leveling stones are just debris, but the shortcut asks the obvious question. If this is just natural geology, why is it the only natural formation in the world that looks exactly like a cyclopean highway? Why does it align perfectly with the rising sea levels of the last ice age? If the water was lower 10,000 years ago, this wouldn't be underwater. It would be a massive stone boulevard sitting high and dry on the coast. We call it a road, but a road leads somewhere. If we follow the pavement into the deeper water, what are we missing? Did we find the front driveway of a civilization that drowned and then decide to stop looking because the address wasn't on our map?